Hi again. Dwight Wilson's Armageddon Now, the history of premillennial, specifically dispensational teaching on the last days. And we're in chapter 3 now. And in this chapter, entitled Armageddon Almost, he starts with 3 quotes from publications, evangelical publications in the First World War period. First is from Our Hope, August 1916. The time cannot be far off when Russia's millions, augmented by the armies that she will gather from these other nations, will be thrown by their rulers into Palestine in order to destroy the nation of the Jews. And this from the Weekly Evangel, April 10th, 1917. We are not yet in the Armageddon struggle proper, but at its commencement. And this from Our Hope, the most popular of the magazines on prophecy back in those days. This is Our Hope, July 1919. The most striking sign of the times is the proposal to give Palestine to the Jews once more. November 2nd, 1917 was a red-letter day in the world's history when the British Foreign Secretary addressed his now famous letter to Lord Rothschild on this subject. To this, Wilson comments, World War I stimulated the premillennialists to a tiptoe expectancy and also provided tantalizing fulfillment of some of their longings. The war itself came as no shock to these opponents of postmillennial optimism. They had not only looked toward the culmination of the age in Armageddon, but anticipated wars and rumors of wars as signs of the approaching end. R.A. Torrey, Dean of the Bible Institute of Los Angeles, now called Biola, by the way, wrote in 1913, before the war ever began, quote, while we talk peace, we are increasing our navies and our armies. We are squandering untold millions in schemes for destroying the lives of our fellow men and for protection and extension of our own nation. We talk of disarmament, but we all know it is not coming. All our present peace plans will end in the most awful wars and conflicts this old world ever saw. End of quote. Such predictions, when fulfilled, produce more than just an I told you so attitude. They served believers as demonstrated proof of the validity of their whole literalistic theological system. During the war, Arno C. Gaebelein, editor of Our Hope, reprinted his Prewar Doom sayings. In 1909, he had said, quote, to believe that the age is improving, that the church and the nations are going to establish universal peace is unscriptural. And in 1911, quote, how could some men expect peace in these days when every nation trembles and makes the most colossal preparation for war? Wilson comments, the premillennialist may legitimately be castigated for being a pessimist, yet he sees himself as an optimist looking for the blessed hope of the rapture and the subsequent reign of the Messiah. Any sign of the end is a signal to rejoice. Look up, for your redemption draweth nigh. That's Luke 21:28. As Torrey wrote for the Moody Bible Institute publication during the war, quote, and as awful as conditions are across the water today, and as awful as they may become in our own country, that is America, the darker the night gets, the lighter my heart gets. End of quote. The term Armageddon was figuratively applied to the war in the popular secular press, but some premillenarians saw the war as the beginning of a literal prophetic Armageddon. The Weekly Evangel, the official publication of the recently organized Premillenarian denomination, the Assemblies of God, cited Revelation 16, verses 14 to 16, as the chronology for the end time. Verse 14 spoke of a world war. Verse 15 spoke of a secret rapture. And verse 16 spoke of Armageddon. It went on to say, quote, we are not yet in the Armageddon struggle proper, but at its commencement. And it may be, if students of prophecy read the signs aright, that Christ will come before the present war closes and before Armageddon. The war preliminary to Armageddon, it seems, has commenced. This is, of course, reflecting the new dispensational position that the rapture of the saints would occur before the Great Tribulation and Armageddon. C.I. Scofield thought that the war would be the death struggle of the present world system, which would be succeeded by the kingdom of God. Certain particular aspects of the war were also depicted as prophetic. Isaiah 19:23, for instance. quote, "In that day there shall be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria." And that was cited as speaking of the railroads between Cairo and Jerusalem. Funded by the Turks and British, these railroads became known as the Milk and Honey Express. So some premillenarian commentators explain the war simply as God's punishment for the nation's treatment of his chosen people. James M. Gray, dean of Moody Bible Institute, was quoted as explaining that the trouble in the whole Gentile world today is attributable to the treatment of the Jew. Another view envisioned God's purpose in the war to be the development of the Jewish nation. Walter Scott, in his book At Hand, stated, quote, "The final issue of all European and Asiatic conflicts will be the shining forth of Christ's glory and triumph of the Jew." End of quote. A speaker at the New York Prophetic Conference, held shortly after the armistice, observed in retrospect, "It seems then clear that divine providence has used this horrible war to take Palestine from the Turk and make it possible for the Jewish people to return." End of quote. The common denominator in all these evaluations was God and the Jew. God's hand was in everything, and the purpose of it all was the Jew. While variations on the above themes were quite common among premillenarians, one analysis was apparently unique. An evangel writer said that as an answer to worldwide days of prayer on October 6th and 7th, 1912, the war actually began, October 7th, 1912, when Bulgaria declared war on Turkey. As the war developed, speculation arose about the outcome in light of prophecy. One inclination of the premillenarian press was to grasp every conceivable morsel of prophetic significance from the secular press. The King's Business, published by the Bible Institute of Los Angeles, Biola, cautioned against unwarranted interpretations of prophecy. Quote, "Even writers and papers that have hitherto shown no great interest in prophecy are now giving voice to the wildest explanations of current events, supposedly from the standpoint of Bible prophecy." End of quote. The editor, Reuben R.A. Torrey, then cited, for the sake of example, extensive passages from Our Hope, in which the author categorically affirmed that the Great War was not the Battle of Armageddon, nor was it the Great Tribulation, the chief rationale being that the Jews were not yet back in Palestine. The word of caution expressed by the King's Business was derived from historical experience, and again a direct quote, "Had we lived a century ago, when Napoleon was at the zenith of his power, we might well have supposed that the final drama of prophecy had begun." Indeed. More about the reaction to the events in the First World War period, and especially the taking of Jerusalem as an interpretation of the fulfillment of many Bible prophecies next time. Torrey is very cautious about the hysteria. So there you have a contrast with, of course, what we as Jehovah's Witnesses experienced. There was no caution in the predictions of C.T. Russell about 1914, nor was there was even less caution, you could say, in the interpretations in the Finished Mystery published during this very period, 1917. So I'll put in a link to a video we did on the 7 predictions Russell made about the year 1914. See you next time.